Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the awards-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com.
Today we have a very special guest on VoteProPot-Cast. One of the really important organizations that you need to know about is the Marijuana Policy Project. If you're interested in cannabis legal reform, these are the folks who are getting it done. We are very fortunate to have as our guest the social media and communications coordinator for Marijuana Policy Project, Violet Cavendish. Welcome, Violet, to VPPC.
Hi, yes. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Violet, we have something in common, as it turns out. We're both graduates of James Madison University in Virginia.
Oh, really?
Go Dukes.
Yeah, go Dukes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I won't say what year I graduated, but, I am an alum.
Yeah, well, it's great to meet another alum.
Yeah. Are you a sports fan at all?
I can pretend to be. I jump on the bandwagons, especially for the DC sports.
There you go.
Yeah, I was disappointed that we didn't win the national title again.
Well, it was close. We're right up in there.
Yeah.
Last 3 years. Now, you have a lot of public service in your background. Tell us about some of the causes you've worked for and what motivates you to be involved with serving people.
Yeah, so before I got into the marijuana policy reform movement, most of my work was concentrated in homeless services, both like on an individual level, working with both children and adults, and then a family level too. So that is where what motivates me is helping others. Homelessness is a huge issue in the United States, and especially when it comes to children. I don't think people associate homelessness with children, but I worked with kids as young as 5 that were experiencing homelessness. And I got into that background just from really back at JMU. I started taking social justice classes, and then I made that my major. And it's just something that's always moved me and I'm passionate about solving injustices that we're experiencing in the United States.
That's wonderful. And God bless folks like you who have a heart for people. And I don't know how you think about child homelessness and not have a tug at your heart, but it certainly does me. And wonderful that you're involved and have been involved with that. What made you become involved with the cannabis reform movement?
So there's actually one thing that comes to mind when I was working in homeless services. It was in DC. Actually, I was working with adults that were experiencing homelessness and mental illnesses. It was a great organization. And there was one client that we had who was having issues with the law because he was using medical marijuana and ended up being arrested for it. And it just ended up us having to advocate for his use of medical marijuana and seeing how all these problems tied into each other and seeing that he really needed it and it was helping him more than his other medications that he was prescribed. But he ended up being in the criminal justice system because of it. And that kind of switched my focus to the broader marijuana policy reform movement and seeing it opened my eyes to how impactful it is today still and how many people are affected by prohibitionist laws across the United States. So that kind of forced me into this other kind of work that I'm doing now. Yeah,
now it's interesting that you bring that up because last episode I kind of took to task the whole thing about this "what about the children" argument, and in particular I kind of was railing on Tucker Carlson, who's always bringing up, well, what about the children? How are we going to? And what about the children of the parents who have been sent away for hard time for simple possession, who grow up without a mother or a father? What about those children? And it strikes me that that's kind of how you're approaching this somewhat.
Yeah, it's terrible. No one should have to grow up without their parent for simple possession. That's what they're incarcerated for. It's really terrible.
So
just unjust.
And how did you get to be involved with Marijuana Policy Project?
I started here about 2 years ago, 2 years and some change. And I actually just started as an intern, wanted to get my foot in the door. So, just very interny tasks, stuffing envelopes, helping out wherever I could.
Paying your dues.
Yeah, we all do. A lot of the organization starts off at that level, which is really cool to see, because then you see how everybody's grows and contributes to this movement at large. So yeah, definitely pay the dues. And then I got into the communications department just from seeing a need for mostly social media. I saw a need, and they just gave me a few responsibilities to start with, and it has grown so much over these last 2 years.
So give our listeners a rundown on what Marijuana Policy Project is all about. What do you folks stand for? What does your organization do?
Yeah, that's great. So the Marijuana Policy Project, we believe that marijuana policy should be judged according to whether the overall harm is reduced or increased. And it's clear to us that prohibition has done and continues to do more harm than good. It costs taxpayers billions of dollars a year. It prevents police from focusing on real and more serious crimes. It disproportionately impacts communities of color. It doesn't keep marijuana out of the hands of minors at all, and hasn't done anything to improve public health or safety. So that is what motivates us to do our work, just knowing that what we know.
So you're saying the war on drugs has failed?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it has.
Absolutely. It's undisputable in our eyes. So our work is mostly focused at the state level. That is where we've had a lot of our success, and that's where we are very influential.
Okay.
So for the last 25 years, we've been working to reform state-level marijuana laws. And since 2000, we're responsible for most of those state laws that have been reformed, including over a dozen medical cannabis laws. We played the leading role in voter initiatives for adult use legalization in Colorado, Alaska, Maine, and Massachusetts, and Nevada and Michigan. And then we also have efforts at the state legislature level, and we spearheaded the campaigns in Vermont and Illinois, which were the first two states to legalize marijuana through the state legislature rather than a ballot initiative.
Now, I have heard tell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there have been cases, or maybe one case, where Marijuana Policy Project attorneys wrote the language of a reform legislation proposal, and the state in question adopted it practically as written. Now, is that urban legend, or is that real?
Yes. So I'm assuming you're talking about Illinois.
Yes.
Yes. So one of my colleagues, Chris Lindsay, he was very, very active in Illinois for 6 or 7 years. It didn't happen overnight. And I think people have that misconception sometimes. We had been working in that legislature for years. And he is a lawyer, and he pretty much drafted the 600-page, I think it was, bill.
Wow.
And there was a few adoptions they made, and a few adjustments, of course. But yeah, largely they...
Yeah, a couple of markups aside, it was basically his bill.
Yeah, he did great work in that state, and
Wonderful.
Of course worked with some lawmakers very closely who were huge advocates, and you always need that when you're working in the state legislature.
What is this fellow's name?
This is Chris Lindsay.
Chris Lindsay.
Yeah,
okay.
He is our Director of Government Relations here at MPP.
Okay, now tell us more about some of the folks at MPP. What stands out about the team, and who are some of the key players?
I think really what stands out us as an organization and all our team members is that we are very passionate about this. We have people in this organization who've been, their entire career have been working towards this issue. A few key players that stand out, hands down, my colleague Karen O'Keefe. Mm-hmm. She is the Director of State Policies and is a powerhouse in marijuana policy. She has been doing this her entire life. She started at a time where marijuana policy reform wasn't popular, and to see how many accomplishments she's had through her work here is really great. Another key player is our Deputy Director, Matthew Schweit. He oversees all of our ballot initiative efforts, and so he's seen so much success with the passing both medical and adult use legalization through his work in the initiatives. So
tell us about your role at MPP.
I am the communications manager, and my role is it's a lot. Most of my day-to-day is media relations, reaching out to media and responding to the media.
Talking to guys like me.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, these kind of interviews. It's always great to have an opportunity to talk about our work because it is great work.
That's great.
Yeah, so mostly dealing with press. I handle all of the social media channels for MPP, and I've seen that grow over the last 2 years, which is great. I assist the state policies team with any kind of state level press that they have, any needs that they have, and same thing with the federal level. I work with the federal team for press related needs.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, and this year is going to be crazy. I'm sure you're totally aware. There's a lot of states that are considering legalization
That's
for
right.
both medical and adult use, so we're very busy this year.
We're talking with Violet Cavendish from Marijuana Policy Project, MPP.org. You know, Violet, we sometimes, speaking of the state level, we sometimes joke about South Dakota and the fact that it's the only state in the union where VoteProPot-Cast has yet to see a single download.
Oh.
And we figured that they're just not a pro-pot state. Fair enough. But now we hear that South Dakota is making some moves toward legalization. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so that was very exciting for us. It is officially going to be on the ballot that voters will decide on both medical and adult use legalization in November. This is the first state to ever do that. There's never been a state that's legalized adult use before medical or had both questions on the same ballot.
Wow, jumping right to the front of the pack.
Yeah. And what our polling has shown in the state is that South Dakotans do want to see their marijuana laws reformed. And what we're finding, or what we have found, is that the state legislature and the governor are just so behind when it comes to being on the same page with their constituents for this issue. So we really are cautiously optimistic, I'll say, that medical will pass as well as adult use.
That's great to hear. I mean, that's very exciting news. Now, and as with any of these legislation, there's a lot more at stake than just, yes, it's legal or no, it's not legal. There's a lot of things that go on that can or cannot be part of a legislative reform package. So let's get down and dirty with some of those issues, shall we? Not too into the weeds, because I'm not a policy expert, and there are probably others better than the two of us to speak about this. But let's just talk about a couple issues. First of all, home grow. Now, I believe that Marijuana Policy Project is big time in favor of home grow. Is that right?
Yes, we are definitely in favor of home grow. We believe that everybody should have the right to grow marijuana if it's legal in the state. However, if some lawmakers are very against it, and if it is going to get to the point where they will not pass legislation to legalize, if it includes home grow, then we err on the side of being able to leave it out as a package and going back after legalization to advocate for it.
Okay, because and I wonder what has been the main resistance to that been political, or is it coming from the industry?
I think it has a little bit to do with both, to be quite honest.
Okay. How so?
When it comes to the legislature, there's a lot of concerns of how will it be enforced, and if there's a maximum limit, if you can only grow 6 plants, like how is that going to be enforced? So they are unsure about that. And then when it comes to the industry, there's sometimes pushback because they want a monopoly in a state where they will benefit more, because if you are a distributor or in running dispensaries, if people aren't allowed to grow their own, they are reliant on you. So it's not something that we agree with at all when it comes to the industry and their stance on that, but we have seen that.
Now, doesn't it strike you, here in America, in the land of the home and the free of the brave, that we should be debating over whether they will allow us, citizens of the United States, to grow a plant? Doesn't that strike you as odd?
It is extremely odd. I mean, there's never been a law that doesn't allow people to grow, tomatoes. So, why would it? Right. So,
what other plants can we think of that the federal government tells the citizens, no, you may not grow it?
Right. I don't think there's too much.
And we're fighting the government for them to allow us? That's not how this is supposed to work, is it?
It shouldn't be how it's supposed to work. And unfortunately, it is how it is working out right now. Mm-hmm. It's coming from a very libertarian approach, and it's your freedom. You should have the right to. You shouldn't be told that you're not allowed to. So,
I mean, unless the government can show some compelling interest, and they can't.
No, they cannot. It's just a matter of keeping our advocacy efforts up to repeal these laws, which shouldn't be there in the first place.
Next issue, CBD in products. There is a House proposal, I believe, coming forth to allow that. Where does that stand now?
It gets a little tricky when it comes to CBD because hemp was legalized through the 2018 Farm Bill. And so hemp is, of course, the plant that contains less than 0.3% of THC, which is, of course, the psychoactive component of marijuana. So CBD that is derived from hemp is legal now in states that have legalized hemp at their level. So, but what we're seeing, there's been a lot of, because it happened so quickly at the federal level with the Farm Bill, there's FDA considerations, there's state level considerations. So you just saw this huge boom of CBD products, and
right,
it's,
you can get CBD products for your dog.
CBD products for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that is something actually we're watching very closely and trying to see how it's approached, both at the state, federal, through the FDA, everything, to see where they go from here.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see whether the states are, that are resisting, are they still kind of waiting to see what the federal government does? Are they taking their lead from the feds?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's
know.
what's happening in South Dakota. As we mentioned earlier, hemp is still not legal there. And the governor was still very against it up until recently, where she's showing a little bit more of a transition into being open to the idea of legalizing hemp in South Dakota. But yet there's still states that are not going to do it.
Marijuana Policy Project changing governors' minds. That's good stuff.
Yeah, trying to.
You guys should be very proud of the work you do. How about now? You, I'm sure, attend a lot of industry events. We are at VoteProPot really kind of I've made it our resolution to get more involved with. We've been to a few, but not nearly some that we would like to go. What are some of the events that you guys make sure to attend, and what are some of the ones that maybe folks like us or our listeners would go to?
Right. So there seems to be a marijuana industry event every week now, not even just in the United States. They're really just have grown so much over the past decade. It's crazy to see. One that we always attend is MJ BizCon. It's usually in Las Vegas.
Okay.
I think it was in December this past year.
Everybody goes to the Vegas shows.
Yeah, and that's probably the largest industry event across the board.
Okay.
I think 20,000 people plus attend. So that is one we always make sure to attend. Other than that, I would say Bazinga is having a cannabis event. I'm not sure if they've ever done one in the past, but that would be a good one to attend. I think there's going to be a lot of influential leaders there.
Okay.
And then also South by Southwest has done its own cannabis event during their event.
Down in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, so that brings in a lot of different people in the cannabis field, not just industry. I mean, advocates, industry as well. Just everybody seems to be going to that as of recently.
Well, there's another great reason to go to South by Southwest.
Right.
So now when you go to some of these shows, what does the organization what do you want to accomplish when you get there?
A big thing we like to do is remind people that are in the industry that there are still states without legalization and that marijuana prohibition is still negatively impacting so many people across the country. So we use our platform to remind people that this is still happening, and without their support, this is not going to advance anymore. I think there's this misconception that legalization is inevitable now. It's going to happen no matter what, so we don't need to work towards it. And that's really not the case at all.
Wrong, yes.
Yeah.
Do not get complacent.
Exactly. If we're not working for it, it's not going to happen. And that's just the truth.
Right.
And then, of course, we try to form relationships, have people supporting us. If there's industry members that are actually making a good amount of money. We're trying to get them to be donors, of course, so we can continue our work and get more states to legalize.
We've made a point on the podcast a few times recently, especially my colleague Andrew, that the resistance, the anti-legalization people are really making a kind of a last push. They feel like this is inevitable and they're not going to let it be. Do you get that sense?
Yeah, they work hard just like we do. There are definitely opponents to legalization still out there, and some of the groups are well funded and really make our efforts hard, especially in ballot initiative states, because they can run their own campaign against the initiative.
So what can we at VoteProPot-Cast do? What can our listeners do to help you guys and the movement in general move the needle?
Yeah, so there are several ways for people to get involved in this movement, and a lot of them don't take too much time or money, which is great. It's very easy to get involved. To start, it's always great to contact your lawmakers. We encourage those people in states to do that all the time for all sorts of reforms, as from decrim to medical marijuana to legalization to things such as like home grow and expungement and all sorts of marijuana reforms. So sending letters to both your U.S. Senator and Representative and your state level representatives. I think it's especially important at the state level. If you have the opportunity to meet with your state representative about the issue, that's really valuable. It has a considerable amount of influence on elected officials, especially if you've been negatively impacted by prohibition and can tell your story.
That would be powerful.
It is. We've seen it happen so many times, and I think that's one of the best ways to convince lawmakers that may be hesitant or against legalization, just showing them the human impact of it. Especially in the cannabis industry, if you have a platform, use it to highlight and promote sensible cannabis policies. Again, it's that reminder that it's not inevitable and we still need help. We still have to continue our work. And then other than that, just educating people in your life. Some people are still led by the stigmatization and misinformation surrounded by marijuana. So if you can dismantle that at any time possible, that always helps. And then lastly, of course, you can donate to MPP so we can continue our advocacy efforts.
Absolutely. And we absolutely encourage you to do that. Now, we have a list of things that you can do at VoteProPot.com. And one of the things, we've got a link to Marijuana Policy Project. And we can't begin to tell you, Violet, what an inspiration MPP has been. Andrew McCready's founded VoteProPot in 2014. And then we kind of took off after he helped campaign for governor in Maryland, a woman who was very foursquare in favor of cannabis reform and very much inspired by the work of MPP. And that's when our listener or readership started to explode. And so it's been a real big boost to us, just kind of watching what you guys do and doing it. So we'll put that link. We've got that link on VoteProPot.com. We'll put it in the show description. And yes, please do as many of those things as you can. And Violet, tell us how to get in touch with Marijuana Policy Project.
You can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's at Marijuana Policy on Twitter, and then Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, it's Marijuana Policy Project. You can join our email alerts. If you follow the link on VoteProPot, there will be email alerts you can sign up for. You can also sign up for state alerts, so that will keep you updated on what's going on in your state and how you can help with the state level efforts. And yeah, I think that's it.
Fantastic. And, as I said, we have resolved to go to more shows and conferences across the country as much as we can. And I'll be looking for you and for Marijuana Policy Project. We sure would love to have you on the show again at some point. We've been talking with Violet Cavendish of Marijuana Policy Project. We really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. All of this incredibly good information. And thank you for joining us, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for Vote Pro Podcast. If you enjoy the show, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your thoughts at VoteProPot.com/contact or send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com, and please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to be part of the show, call our message line at 240-257-2441. Tell your friends about us and be sure to like, follow and share us on social media. Just go to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.
Lock me up, find me good, label me a menace to your quiet neighborhood. I don't grow no plants, the state says I can't. That's not freedom, freedom, freedom. That's the point. Smoke a bowl, I roll a joint, do what I want. If I hurt nobody, that's the point. And if I wanna get high, why shouldn't I? That's not freedom, freedom, freedom. That's the point. Decide what's best for you and me. Smoke a bowl or roll a joint. Do what you want. If it hurts nobody, that's the point. So let's get high, yeah, you and I. It's called freedom, freedom, freedom. It's called freedom, freedom, freedom. Oh yeah, that's the point.